What's the scariest thing that's ever woken you up during the middle of the night? I woke up to a cockroach that had crawled into my ear. I shit you not. Excruciating pain. Tried to flush it out with water. No luck. I had to lie there for 6 hours before mum took me to hospital while it moved around. Scratched my eardrum and fluttered its wings. That sound is terrifying when it comes from in your ear. My ear was bruised from how hard I was pushing in an attempt to stop it moving. They first tried to blast it out with a high pressured little hose, which hurt like a BTCH and didn't work. So then they poured oil into my ear to drown it. Then sucked the fucker out with a little vacuum. Woke up from a dream about a man who climbs in windows and watches people sleep to see someone sitting on the chair next to the bed I was sleeping in. Then actually woke up. Edit: this happened at my grandparents' house when I was in high school or middle school, and since then I've had at least one other dream like this at their house. I was staying in a different room that is attached to the attic and someone came through the door in the middle of the night. I'm not sure if I placed emphasis on the creep factor of that room because of the attic and the rumors that the previous owner's mother-in-law lived and died in the attic, or if that house is just fucked up. Double edit: my grandmother had one of these dreams too, only it was death telling her to come. She apparently did not go. Somebody trying to break in. I was living alone at the time in a little studio flat in the city center. It was about 3 AM and I was woken up by some crashing sounds in the hallway. And then somebody started kicking hard at my bedroom door. Fortunately my door at the time was a pretty hefty fire door with a good strong lock. So I had enough time to call the police before he did any damage to it. I was living pretty close to the police station, so they turned up fast with dogs and caught him still inside the building. As it turned out, the guy was absolutely wasted and looking for somewhere to sleep. And from the outside my place still looked like the empty nightclub it used to be before it was converted into flats. So my guess is he thought it would be empty, rather than actually attempting to attack anyone living there. I was still very shaken up by it at the time. Well, it was about 8 months ago, about 2:40 am. I was sleeping in my bed when I heard a loud bang in my kitchen. Unaware of what it was, I got up and wasn't sure of anything. I get my gun from my safe and walk out. I then hear a huge rattle of pans and plates falling on the floor. I was really freaking out. My blood was pumping so hard and it was so bad I was starting to get a headache from it. I creep out of my hallway. It's pitch black. I look in the kitchen, poking my head in. I see 2 strong glowing eyes staring at me. So fucking scary, man, it rustled my jimmies so hard. I booked it back in my room and popped open the window and hopped the FCK out cause I don't got time to deal with that bullshit. I was fucking scared. I was on my phone about to dial 911 when I remembered that I bought a fucking cat like a month ago and it ran away and came back that night. Needless to say, I saved a nice pair of undies from being slaughtered by my fatal bowel movement of terror. I knew I shouldn't have bought a fucking cat. I stepped out of my bathroom to find my entire house lit up. 2 EMTs and a sheriff's deputy in my living room. They proceeded to try to tell me to come sit down, stay calm, relax and let them help me. I was like, WTF is going on? Why are you in my house? Double quote. Apparently I had suffered a grand mal seizure in my sleep. Never having this happen before. My wife called 911. I must have come out of the seizure. Got up, walked into the bathroom to take a piss and had no idea it even happened. While I was in the bathroom, they arrived. Came in and my wife had turned all the lights on and I was oblivious to everything. Weirdest feeling ever. Would not do again. I woke up to noise on my parents' back deck behind my room. In my groggy sleep I figured it was my brothers and his friends. But then realized he hasn't lived there for 2 years. Then suddenly an intense bright light starts shining right in my eyes. Really bright. It actually scared me. I thought I was being abducted. So I just laid there staring at it. It just stays pointing right in my face. Then there's loud banging on the back door. I was spooked. I get out of bed and it's the police. They start questioning me like I did something wrong. The one says, "Hey, I've seen you around. Then they continued to act like I had done something wrong. My parents were in Florida at the time and my sister-in-law was at the house and she came down and talked to them. While I just went back to bed annoyed. They said the side door was slightly ajar so they decided to investigate. The funny thing is you can't even see the side door from the street. I don't know WTF they were up to. TL. DR. Woken up by bright light in my eyes at 3 AM. Thought I was being abducted. So I just laid there staring at it. It just stays pointing right in my face. Then there's loud banging on the back door. I was spooked. I get out of bed and it's the police. They start questioning me like I did something wrong. The one says, "Hey, I've seen you around." Then they continue to act like I had done something wrong. My parents were in Florida at the time and my sister-in-law was at the house and she came down and talked to them, while I just went back to bed annoyed. They said the side door was slightly ajar so they decided to investigate. The funny thing is you can't even see the side door from the street. I don't know WTF they were up to. TL. DR. Woken up by bright light in my eyes at 3 AM. Woke up around midnight to the sound of commotion outside. What drew my attention is that one of the voices was a young girl. As I became more aware I started listening to what they were saying. Now I lived in downtown Hartford in a building that was Section 8. The maturity level of residents was all over the place. Some were drug dealers, others were hard-working immigrants and young families. The young girl's father was killed and his friends and family were explaining it to the girl. I've experienced nothing sadder than completely undeveloped adults poorly consoling a child saying he dead and ain't never coming back, to a young child hysterically crying that her father was just killed. The screams from the child along with the adults who were no more capable of composing themselves than the child will never leave me. Rattling on the roof that started my never barked in 5 years dog barking. Then a scraping noise. I'm looking out the front and back doors. It's 3 AM. Then as I'm heading back to the bedroom I scan the bathroom and see a large black arm snaking down the skylight. Fairly packed my dax. Called the cops but don't know if the owner of the arm is in or out the house. Stand in the front doorway with the cops online for about 5-10 minutes till they turn up and drag the bloke off the roof. Felt like an hour but the cops were great. The courts suck. He was back at around 9:30 am. But that's another story. When I was younger, 11 or so, my mother was dating this guy who was cranky as hell if he didn't get enough sleep. Summer nights were the worst for him as my brothers and I would stay up playing N64. Like boys would do. Once we heard our parents come walking, we'd hit the lights and pretend to sleep. Well, one night after some intense gaming, we actually went to sleep. I constantly wake up at it when I'm sleeping next to my brother since he sleeps like a starfish. So one night I woke up and saw a dark figure standing at the end of the bed. I got so freaked out I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. I slightly opened my eyes to see if he's still there and I can see him through the light post outside my house coming through the windows. He was just standing there. Then he got closer to look at our faces. So I closed my eyes as if I was sleeping. I think what happened next was I closed it for so long I actually fell asleep. I told my brother what happened, but thought nothing of it since nothing happened. When I was younger, 5-7 years old, I kept having the same dream for months. It started with me being in a black limousine with about 10, seemingly, rich, elderly white men. They were all popping champagne bottles and toasting each other. The chauffeur would drop me off at my house. The men would say bye. And I'd stand in front of my driveway. For some reason, I could hear every footstep coming from the inside of my house. And I could hear 2 sets of feet running around. I would hear my mom's blood-curdling scream. And then the sound of a very terrifying roar would follow her scream. I would always jolt awake right after that. I've never made it past that part. Just moved in with my boyfriend, now husband, when I had to leave for a week on a business trip, then leave for another week on a family vacation that was planned before he and I got serious. Basically, just as I got used to sleeping next to someone, I got used to sleeping alone again. First night back, I fall asleep pretty early. By the time he comes in, I'm in a deep sleep. The old bed sinks just a little too much and I become aware that someone had just crawled in bed with me. But I was too sleepy to remember that I was now living with another human being. Freaked out. Yelled, "Who are you?" And my boyfriend. And essentially broke his heart. He now climbs in bed extra quiet. Went a week without sleep and started hallucinating. They were just minor things at first. Hearing doors close. Seeing shadows. Then, while I was sitting in a chair in my living room when I hear somebody call my name, I turned my head and see my cat. He opened his mouth and says my name again. And then I passed out. When I was younger, a woman, whom I did not know, knocked on the frame of my door and shouted, "I'm home," and went downstairs. I woke up my parents and my mother found her knocked out on our floor. She turned out to be our neighbor's daughter and she got back home from drinking and thought our house was hers. We woke her up and she left. But she went home barefoot and forgot her shoes. TLDR, drunk neighbor breaks into our house thinking it's hers and we are left with her shoes. We feel too awkward to return them as it might be embarrassing for her or she might not remember. This is kind of relevant. But it's 4 AM right now. I'm about to go to sleep and I hear a jingling. Like keys, or something more sinister. I live in the city and there is a lot of foot traffic in front of my house, though usually not at 4 AM. I sit in my front room with the window open, and this is a slightly sketch part of town, and combined with the topic of this thread, I start to get a little nervous. I look out a crease of my window waiting to see who walks by when suddenly, I see a German Shepherd. She just walked into the backyard of my neighbor's house. It's currently unoccupied. This is the second time I've seen this dog wandering around without an owner. I'm not sure what to do. I'm going to go outside now and see if the dog is still around. Was on vacation with my family and I was about 7-8 years old. Woke up one night because of these weird gagging noises. My brother was in the bed beside the mattress which I slept on. So I told him to cut the sheet and go to sleep. He didn't stop. So I turned on the light and saw he was choking to death on his own vomit. Scared shitless, I ran and woke up my parents. We rushed out of the door and got in the car, as he was lifeless. Luckily, we saw a cop car and yelled at them while speeding on the highway. And we tailed them to the ER after they understood it was serious shit. My brother lived and we found out that he had had an epileptic seizure for the first time ever, which combined with overeating had caused him to almost choke to death. He lived. But holy shit. I still think about if I had not woken up and we had not spotted that cop car. We were in a small town in Spain, so we didn't know where the ER was. So many coincidences. Damn. I was put on Celexa when I was a kid. The weirdest dream I had of that was seeing all these different kids experiencing the worst possible death. There was one kid who a statue holding a hatchet fell on him and the hatchet nailed his skull. Then another kid rolled out of bed and through a trap door, and as the door closed, it poured this liquid which was lighter fluid and the casket erupted in flames and the kid is screaming. Then another kid was flying on this weird glider and fell out. As he is falling, a jet flies by and he get caught in the engine and the engine spews out the blood. I had different versions of this kind of dream to where I could not sleep for 5 days. I would go to school looking like the undead. It scared the hell out of me. My family was staying at this haunted hotel in Savannah, GA. It was an old hospital during the Civil War or something like that. And my brother and I were sharing a bed. The first night, I woke up to him smashed up against the headboard. No noise and movement at all. When I asked him what he was doing, he said he was afraid to move because he wasn't entirely sure if he was dead or paralyzed. That he woke up to this enormous pressure and was pushed up against the headboard. Freaked me out and I refused to share a bed with him again out of fear of another ghost attack. The next night, I was sleeping with my sister and she rolled over on me. I kept trying to push her off when I noticed she wasn't anywhere near my side of the bed. Almost peed my pants. And then watched TV until his son came up because FCK ghosts. TL. Dr. Ghosts are real. And scary. A friend of mine was in 6th grade when he moved his bedroom down into the basement. He was all excited to be farther away from his parents' room and more on his own. One night he wakes up to some non-specific noise and rolls over to go back to sleep. Well, as he rolls over, he glances past the window well that was right next to his bed. And in the darkness he can just make out a dozen or so tiny faces staring at him through the window. He told me he was so scared that he couldn't even scream. Turns out his 4-year-old sister was playing in the basement that day and had stacked a bunch of her dolls in the window well. When I was in high school, my sister and I were babysitting a large group of kids. I think were 7 or 8 of them. We finally were able to get all of them to go to bed and went to sleep ourselves. Exhausted, we were woken in the middle of the night by blood-curdling screams. My heart was in my throat. It sounded like one of the kids was being murdered. I was so disoriented I couldn't undo the baby gate and the door to the room I was sleeping in. I managed to run into the kitchen and saw my sister crouched down with her hands on one of the girl's shoulders trying to talk to her. And the girl was just standing there with her arms slapping at my sister, screaming hysterically, not seeming to see or hear her. It turns out she had night terrors, which I had never heard of until that evening. Might have been nice if her parents had told us before they left. I was sick with the flu about 10 years ago and was stuck in bed for about a week, during which I read The Shining by Stephen King. Which is a bad idea as you're already half delirious from fever and shit. So anyways, one day I wake up on the couch to a sound coming from the fireplace. When I switch on the lights there is a fucking barred owl staring at me. I thought I was dreaming still and was exhausted and passed out again. Next time I wake up it's on top of my fridge still staring at me. This time I knew it was real. Not so much jump scare as a lot of uneasiness. Those fuckers have a creepy gaze. I had recently moved into the 4th floor of a building with my girlfriend and 1-year-old daughter. It was about 2 AM one evening when I wake up to a loud knocking in the hallway. I'm sure it's some annoying neighbor activity only to see through the peephole the back of a man's head. On his head there are staples running up the side of his shaved skull. My jaw drops as I contemplate calling the cops. I live in LA so I assume it's some crazy homeless man that found his way into our building. He stands outside for a moment or two then knocks again on our door. I grab a blunt object and crack the door waiting to defend my domicile if need be. The man turns around and it's my girlfriend's younger drug addict brother who just left the hospital. He was beaten up in a subway a night before and didn't want to stay in the hospital so he unadvisedly came to our door. He's the type that wouldn't think beyond his own wants and would just show up like that without calling. One of the more surreal moments in my life. Well, not necessarily scary, but it made me feel really uneasy. When I was in junior high also, I would go to sleep in shorts and a t-shirt. I woke up in the middle of the night and found my shorts halfway down to my knees. Figured I must have been kicking around traveled south since the elastic waistband was pretty loose. I pull them back up and go back to sleep. I wake up again. And now they are down to my ankles. My blanket's half off of me. And my pillow's on the ground. Again. I figured I must have been thrashing a bit in my sleep. Put everything back in order. And get some shut-eye. I wake up a third time. But this time my shorts were completely off. Blanket and pillow somewhere on the floor. And my shirt was almost completely off. Only one arm was through a sleeve. I got dressed. Organized my bed. And was pretty weirded out that even my shirt was almost off this time. I debated about even going back to sleep since I had to be up for school in about 3 hours. But I eventually knock out. I wake up in the morning with everything where it was and in the same position I slept. TLDR. Woke up 3 times throughout the night to find myself slowly being stripped. Woke up to my wife, now ex-wife, standing with the man she had been cheating on me with for over a year. At the time, I lived with my wife. I got home after a business trip and surprised my spouse with flowers and a movie in our bedroom. We cuddled, watched the movie, and after some fantastic coming home sex, I went to sleep. Apparently, She was cheating in me for about a year. And when I got home, she was in bed with the guy she was cheating on me with. They panicked and he hid under the bed. After I fell asleep, he got out and was angry that he had to hide for several hours. And so they were arguing. The whispering woke me up. I walked out and saw them, and asked what he was doing and why my wife was talking to him. He tried to just leave, and I refused to let him just walk out. My wife eventually told me who he was. Needless to say, divorce followed. In my first week at university in North Wales, I was awoken by a fire alarm, commonplace in any student digs, as I'm sure many of you know. Now this wouldn't have been so bad but for the fact I was very much still drunk. The alarm in the room came with a glowing red light and it declared something to the effect of "This is a fire alarm. Please make your way to the nearest exit blah blah," but in Welsh first. Needless to say, I was horrified and convinced some hell beast, conversing in a demonic tongue, had come to take me away. I'm 19. This happened my first night of staying in my new condo with my roommate after moving out. I woke up to fire blazing so bright outside my window I'd thought it was morning. My roommate was pounding on my door and I called to her saying I knew what was going on and I'd be out soon. I grabbed my dog and my phone and rushed out. I called my dad while she dialed 911. I think it was the scariest wake-up call he'd ever gotten to. We ran into the bathroom after checking the front door to see if we could get out, but the flames were already lapping at the stupid wooden roof. We then ran into my roomie's bathroom, covered our faces with a towel and promptly passed out. This all happened in about 5 minutes time, and the fire started not 20 minutes after I went to sleep. Second scariest thing was waking up in the hospital after about a week with no memories of that time, to ask what happened and be told that I'd died and been revived 4 times. Crazy shit. I'm grateful and ridiculously lucky to be alive. A man broke into my friend's house where I was sleeping over and attacked me. I woke up to him next to me on the floor, with his hand on my arm trying to wake me up from what I am assuming was drug-induced semi-consciousness, greatly lacking in nervous system response. I wasn't registering any danger with him, so I just stood up to go tell my friend that there was someone on the floor. But I wasn't scared yet. He threw me to the ground, pinned me down, and I started screaming at the top of my lungs. He choked me until I agreed to shut up. He then lifted me to my feet, kept a hand on my throat in case I screamed again, and walked me over to the bathroom. I was crying as quietly as I could, and, religious upbringing, I whispered, "Jesus help me." At that moment, he looked as if his mind went completely blank and he started looking around like he was confused. Then he walked right out the back door. Religious or not, you've got to agree that's nuts, and I'm just telling it how it happened. A couple of years ago I was woken by a noise at about 3 in the morning. I was real groggy from just having woken up, and I had no glasses on so I couldn't see what was going on. I figured it was my housemate, so I called her name and asked what she wanted. By this point I'd started to wake up and my eyes adjusted to the dark well enough to see a figure standing near my desk. It was a man in a cap and a hoodie. We both sort of stared at each other for a second before he snatched my laptop and bolted to the kitchen, where he escaped through the window. Despite the fact that I was traumatized for a good while after, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The old laptop he'd stolen was barely working. I wasn't even using it at the time. I had a desktop, and since it was insured I got a brand new MacBook, which I immediately gave to my mum since she needed a new computer. Junkie Thief 0. Me 1. Fell asleep drunk. Woke up at about 4 AM to go piss. Stumbled to the bathroom. Still drunk. Knocking sheet over. As I turned to go into the bathroom, I glanced into the kitchen and I saw a possum with its dead, satanic black eyes sitting upright in front of the sink. My cat was calmly sitting upright a few feet away from the possum, making eye contact. It was like I had interrupted a secret animal conversation. I very nearly had a heart attack. I remember stumbling back and clutching my chest. I really had to pee though, so I closed the door. calmed down and pissed. Because I was drunk. After I had pissed, I forgot about the ordeal in the kitchen. My heart was still racing and I couldn't figure out why. I went back to bed and forgot about it all, thinking it was just a dream. A few days later, my wife found a turd too big to be from a mouse, but too small to be from a cat. That night, I was walking across the house and came across a possum eating the cat's food with the cat. He looked up at me like sup bro, and I had the sudden realization of what happened a few nights before. My dad woke me up around 3 or so in the morning telling me and my brother that our grandpa just had a heart attack. We drove nearly an hour to the hospital, and while he was still with us when we arrived, he couldn't hold on and passed soon after. The whole family, aunts, uncles, grandma, great-grandma, were there for him, and at least he passed with family nearby. So it was a pretty scary wake up, followed by more fear of the possibilities and ending with grief. I woke up to my younger brother pounding on my bedroom door. I screamed at him to go away and rolled over to try to fall back asleep. He kept pounding, so I got up and opened my door to find paramedics performing CPR on my little sister in the hallway. My mom was standing there crying and my stepdad was just pacing back and forth saying she's dead. She's dead. Over and over again. My sister's lips were blue and she looked so lifeless. After a few minutes they scooped her up and took her outside. My mom got into the ambulance and my stepdad followed in the car. My brother and I were left standing in the hallway completely shocked. My grandma showed up a few minutes later and started making us breakfast and telling us everything was going to be okay. A while later, my parents walked through the front door without my sister and just gave me a look that told me she was gone. When I was about 15, I bought the Sticks and Stones album by New Found Glory, and as I went to bed that night I decided to listen to it on my stereo start to finish for the first time. The last song on the album, The Story So Far, is a slower song, so I fell asleep before it ended and didn't realize that after the song, there was 20 minutes of silence and then a bonus song played. This bonus song starts off with a scream, then a whispered voice repeating someone's in your house. You're not safe right now for about 30 seconds before it begins to play music. For those 30 seconds, I was in a pitch black room, not having a clue where it was coming from and completely accepting that my life was over.